Well, welcome everyone to Real Balance Global Wellness Services free monthly webinars. These free monthly webinars are brought to you by Real Balance Global Wellness Services, one of the premier leaders in the field of health and wellness coach training. We've trained over 6,000 health and wellness coaches all around the world and invite you to take a look at us at realbalance.com. We're fully approved by the International Consortium for Health and Wellness Coaching, which I was actually a founding member of. And we're also approved for approved coach-specific training hours by the International Coach Federation, as well as approved by many professional organizations for continuing education. So these webinars are brought to you once a month, totally for free, and they're archived at realbalance.com in the resources section. And if you're one of our students or alumni, the Coach Center at our website has all of the previous webinars archived there. This webinar will be available for about 2 or 3 months, and then we will archive it in the Coach Center. So the way this works is you're all muted upon entry, and we'd really like your participation right at the end. I'm going to save about the last 10 minutes for our discussion, and please have some questions in mind. Be ready to use that Q&A function there on your Zoom recording and check in with that at that time. So what are we talking about this week or this month? A concept we call getting yourself out of the way. It's really about self-vigilance, about looking at what is it that gets in the way of being an effective coach. What do we really mean by this? Now, as a psychotherapist, and I did about 27 years worth of that kind of work as a psychologist, something that they were always talking about in our training was this idea of getting yourself out of the way. And what they were really talking about was your own emotional, psychological stuff. You know, everybody's got their stuff, as we say. And in therapy, it really interferes if your own issues start to cross over and get in the way of the work you're doing with your client. And that can happen in a number of different ways. You know, I would say that of all the psychotherapists and psychologists that I knew that were practicing, there were really two big groups. One group was people that worked on their own personal growth, their own mental, emotional wellness, you might say, and the other group did not. And the effective and ineffective therapist lined up exactly with those two camps. In other words, the ones that weren't very good were the ones that tried to ignore themselves and their own issues. So your own experience, your own attitudes, your own beliefs, prejudices, and projections are what we're going to talk about today. Now, self-vigilance. And let me go ahead and bring up my video here so you can see me while I'm talking about all this. What do I mean by that? Well, we do have to be kind of vigilant because what we're talking about is, you know, concepts, issues here that we're usually not that aware of. The things that get in the way are in the way usually when we don't even realize it. And that's what's frustrating and tricky about it. Now, we're going to take a look here at each of these items. How our own agenda gets in the way, our own blind spots, our own unfinished business, and so forth. Now, one of the things about health and wellness coaching is sometimes we end up promoting our own favorite wellness solution. And this isn't done, you know, in a negative kind of way. We just really want to share what we know works, what's effective. You know, we're really big fans of mindfulness or some other, you know, particular self-help process, some particular way to lose weight or some particular way to eat. And sometimes we just want to share this because, for one thing, we might be thinking, well, you know, if I just tell them, it'll save time. Now, we can also get to the point where we're kind of crossing the what I would call ethical divide, where we're actually mixing our salesmanship with our coaching. And that's truly unethical. And if you take a look at the ICHWC Code of Ethics, which I was chair of the committee that formed, and also the ICF Code of Ethics, you'll see that that's really a big no-no. But we know there's a lot of wonderful things at work. And it doesn't mean we can't make suggestions. It doesn't mean that we can't even do some teaching. But if we're kind of pushing this as an agenda of ours, kind of constructing questions so that they lead people to conclude that, boy, eating kale and doing colon cleansing will save their life. Becoming a runner or getting into CrossFit is the only way to really be healthy and well and really fit. That's where it's really in the way. And it's in the way of the coaching process. It's in the way of the client's growth. It's in the way of what the client is really trying to achieve. Now, many years ago in the wellness field, which I've been in for many years, I heard somebody say, well, wellness is about sales. I thought, whoa, you sure haven't been in the field of wellness very much, have you? Because, have you ever really tried to convince or persuade somebody to be well? You might have gotten agreement. Oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. But did they actually go out and change their life? I really think that happens very rarely. We've got to be careful that this type of agenda doesn't start creeping into our coaching. We maybe, if we can take a look at our recordings and what we're really saying to our clients, are we pulling out all those leading questions? Or are we really trying to guide them so much that we're no longer coaching, we're really consulting? So stick with that good old client-centered coach approach. Oops, excuse me, we'll just go forward one here. So the other thing that I see really showing up every once in a while in coaching, among some of the thousands of people we've trained, there's lots of people that have faced and conquered some kind of big chronic health problem or big health challenge or maybe mental emotional challenge. And they really have a very sincere desire to help others to be successful as well. Now, sometimes that desire to help results in an agenda of pushing your particular solution, your particular way of becoming healthy and well as the answer for everybody. I went through divorce, so inevitably people will, or they'll need to do it the way I did it, or maybe it's more, I overcame this chronic health problem by this formula of diet and exercise and alternative remedial care. We really have to be careful that these powerful feelings, because, it was really profound what we went through, that doesn't start bleeding in to the coaching. So the problem with blind spots is we usually are blind to them. Come on. In our coach training, sometimes I'll say, sometimes what we have to do is like when we're driving a car, you've got your side view mirror, you got your rear view mirror. But to really be safe, you've got to twist around and look over your shoulder and make an effort to check it out that there's not somebody right there in that lane right beside you, and it's not the time for you to pass that car in front of you. So it may just be a lack of awareness. So we're always working on tuning into ourselves, our client, and the coaching process to be as aware as possible. But the problem with blind spots is it lines right up, it's part of self-deception, kidding ourselves, fooling ourselves. And sometimes we really do have to twist around and examine what's going on to see them. The other thing that shows up that creates blind spots is when we have values that are really different than our client. We may be coaching somebody who values things 180 degree different than us. They may have conversations with us where their politics show up, where their values around how to raise children show up, or whatever. And does that influence us in a way where maybe we withhold empathy? Maybe we start to kind of engineer or manipulate the way we're coaching? Or does it bring out judgment? Now, this is really common in health and wellness coaching because we see people all the time exhibiting SDBs, self-defeating behaviors. You know, the overweight client that shows up to our appointment with a 20-ounce bottle of Coca-Cola in their hand. You know, it's so easy to go down this road. Also, there's what the people in motivational interviewing have called the righting reflex. We want to show them the right way to do it, the right way to eat, et cetera, et cetera. That is so tempting. So listen to your recordings. That's one way to pick up blind spots. But the other is get somebody else's point of view. A lot of times, the only way you find a blind spot is through someone else's eyes. It's really hard to pick them out yourself. Now, here's something that I make a suggestion to you. If you find yourself saying these words, hold on for a second and examine what's really going on. If you're laying your idea of what they should do, what they ought to do, or you're telling people, I want you to, be careful. You are probably leading an agenda here. Now, it's okay to be directive in coaching. There's a whole continuum of that. But experiment with this. See if your coaching improves by completely eliminating these phrases. Instead of, I want you to make a commitment to walk 3 times next week. It's not about what you want. It's about what does a coach, get across to the client in a way. It's about what the client wants. So shift your language. Instead of I want you to, would you find value in walking 3 times next week? You're still, leading with it. You're still being directive, but you're once again putting it back in the client's hands. I mean, if it's I want you to, the client is like, well, I guess my coach knows best here. I should do what they say, whether I buy into it or not. So check that out. Now, here's the other thing. What's the difference between our own agenda and what the client needs to be safe? We run in all the time to clients who are trying a fad diet. They're trying some extreme form of weight loss or, exercise or something. And where's that line between intervening and interfering? I mean, I often say if our client is pedaling a bicycle toward a cliff, we do have an ethical obligation to shout at them, right? And this is where we really want to be careful because, again, our client is responsible for their own life and their own choices. We're not responsible for psychological or medical screening or diagnosis. And unless you are a medically trained person or psychologically trained person who is responsible for that, that is not the duty of a coach, and don't ever let any company try to get you into that corner. But we do have a need there to say to our client, so tell me what you know about that strange diet. Where did you find out about it? Or if we're already aware that there's a particular diet that's been proven to be dangerous, we can warn them about it and say, are you aware that there's been several studies that, trying that type of diet has led to actually, all these medical problems. All right, let's talk about a really big issue when it comes to getting yourself out of the way. Projection. Okay, time to haul out the psychoanalytic manual here, open up good old Sigmund Freud's head, and take a look at a classic self-defense mechanism. Projection is, I think, best described right here in these few words. When we attribute to others feelings of our own that we find unacceptable. Now, a classic example is somebody who really can't accept their own anger. And so we see other people being overly hostile, overly aggressive. We kind of project that onto them when maybe a little bit of that is showing up, but in our eyes, there's a lot of it showing up. The person who's a bit irritated becomes this person who is really angry with someone. And it kind of distorts our perception when we project like that. We're not seeing what is, we're seeing what we want to see. So this can be negative or positive, which is kind of interesting. We can also project positive attributes onto our client. Like, oh, well, they're popular, they're successful, they're self-confident, when maybe we're doubting those things ourselves. So it can look either way. The other way it shows up, I think, especially in health and wellness coaching, is, wow, doesn't everybody love kale and doing burpees, the really vigorous exercise? Wow, I can't imagine why people, don't share my enthusiasm for this. It's you got turned on to mindfulness and you think, oh, wow, everybody should just love this. And, I can't imagine, this is puzzling to me, why my client is not following through on these commitments to meditate every day. Is that more about what you want to see, or is it about what the client really sees value in and has really chosen? Is it more your stuff instead of the client's stuff? More your thing than their thing? Also, here's another way it really shows up in health and wellness coaching. You may have had an experience, say, smoking cessation, losing weight, getting more sleep, whatever it is, and it was really tough for you. I mean, maybe you did it, congratulations, but it was really a struggle, really a battle. And so you expect that your client is going to have this profound battle to come. It might not be that tough for them. Matter of fact, it may look easy. How does that sit with you? So what's the language that you're choosing? What are you saying to your client that is really kind of leading them to believe that it's going to be tougher than it actually ends up being? What's that going to be like? How are you going to shift the way that you coach? So once again, self-vigilance. Now, the other way this shows up is in projecting our own prejudices. And let me self-disclose a story about my own prejudice that showed up when I started working as a counselor, as a counseling psychologist in the counseling center at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. This was a so-called public Ivy, where though it was a state school, it tended to have a lot of upper class and upper middle class students from pretty wealthy families. About a full third of the students there had no financial worries whatsoever. Another third were kind of adequately funded, and another third were struggling like everybody else and working their way through college. I came from a real blue-collar background, a family of steel mill workers in the upper Ohio River Valley. And that blue-collar, working class kind of background, hard work, all that kind of thing. And I kind of thought that these students that I was counseling kind of had it made, kind of had it easy. And I've got to admit, I think to begin with, I withheld some empathy and understanding until I started to hear their stories more and started to discover that, wow, they've got family dynamics like everybody else. They've got struggles and heartaches like everybody else. They bleed the same red blood, no matter what the background. So be aware. How does your prejudice show up? It isn't just always racial. It isn't just always, from something stereotypic. Really check it out because, again, it's probably a blind spot for you. It just is an attitude or belief that's kind of like a default setting that you need to be aware of and work on. So another way this may show up is if we have some prejudice toward a particular group of people from a particular background, we may not think that they are as capable as they are. And worst of all, we may even come across condescending. So again, really catch yourself, be aware. So how do we really work with this? You know, lots of times we're trying to understand others by simply saying, okay, if I was in that situation, here's what I would do. You know, that's how we kind of try to understand other people's experience. And that's why sometimes when people do really irrational things, we just have a hard time comprehending it. So instead of empathic understanding, we kind of say, well, geez, here's what they should do there. You know, we kind of have that idea that here's the solution for them, because if I was in this situation, geez, I wouldn't do that, or I would do this. So really be careful here. The other big area, of course, is your own unfinished business. In Gestalt therapy, we always talked about what's unfinished, what's seeking completion. You know, everybody's got stuff like this. And are you working on it? Or, you know, this can show up with family of origin issues, projecting our own therapeutic needs and solutions. You know, I found a lot of help in one of these books. And so, boy, that's what my client needs. And am I crossing over now into being a counselor instead of coach? And there's some, you know, real extreme points of view. You know, you can read one author that says everything's an addiction. And you start looking at the way people eat as all about addictive behavior, all about emotional eating, when your client may have nothing to do with that. So again, one size doesn't fit all, and your size isn't necessarily your client's size. Now, perhaps the most disastrous type of projection shows up when we relate to somebody else as though they were someone else. Now, this happens all the time. I mean, not all the time, but it happens occasionally. And when it does, it's really not a good situation. We've all had this experience. We've either done it or others have kind of done it to us. You know, we remind them of somebody, or we see somebody who reminds us of that kid that gave you so much trouble when you were in junior high, or a sibling that always teased you. Now, what's that like? What's it like for your client to do this to you? You know, to project onto you, you know, stuff where you're like, what? Where'd that come from? Carl Jung used to say that the most dangerous psychological mistake is the projection of the shadow onto others. This is the root of almost all conflicts. Now think about that. We kind of have that own shadow side of ourselves that we find hard to accept. That side of us that, you know, we wish was a little more this way instead of the way it is. We project that onto others, trouble ensues. So you can also see this show up where your clients might look to you as the expert, and so you overcompensate by being real buddy-buddy. You know, you're their pal, you're their friend, and you overdo it. You take it too far, and you lose that coach alliance, that coach professional connection. Clients also can put you in that parental role. And if you are aware of this, you might come across as overly professional, you know, and distant. So, tricky stuff. So how do we minimize projection? Let's get to that here and then get to some questions. First of all, self-monitoring. You know, tune into you and how you feel. Your gut is probably going to tell you what's going on. Set really clear boundaries right from the start. Here's what the coaching relationship is like. Here's how it works. Don't have unlimited hours of time with people or minutes of time with people. Have agreements. Even if you're meeting at a coffee shop, we're going to meet for 30 minutes. At 30 minutes, we're going to be done. Or we're going to have an agreement to go for 5 more. Instead of this lengthy, drawn out, now we're chit-chatting as friends. Draw a clear distinction between coaching and therapy. You got to stick with that coaching mindset. Don't get into analyzing your client, diagnosing them. Be vigilant about parental feelings that come up in you. You know, mother or father knows best, right? It's easy to do that with certain clients who kind of draw that out and are looking for it anyway. And when you have that unusual gut feeling, you know, that you can't really fathom what's going on, really check it out. Listen to your recordings. Examine the responses that you're giving to that client. You know, this may be a great time to get into a mentor relationship with somebody if you're not working someplace where you have a supervisor. So, real important things to do here. Lastly, do your own work. You know, your own personal journey. If you're in wellness and health and well-being and you're not dedicated to personal growth, what are you doing in this field? Seriously. I mean, if you're afraid to go there, what's that tell you? You know, what do you need to deal with around that fear? Maybe you need to talk to somebody about that. Your stuff is your stuff, and everybody's got their stuff. Okay, one last note. You've got to coach the way you need to coach. You got to find your own way of doing it. There was many years ago, one of the people that kind of got the whole big backpacking boom off the ground, back when REI had only one store in Seattle. His name was Colin Fletcher. And he was an Englishman, a Welshman, I think maybe, who had a very particular way of backpacking, a specific pack, a specific hat and shorts and everything. A little OCD maybe, but he kind of was a guide to many people to get started in coaching. He wrote a book called The Complete Walker. And I met a young man one time that I gave a ride to in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, who was getting back on the Appalachian Trail to go end to end. And he looked like a Colin Fletcher clone, right down to his 4-foot bamboo walking stick. And what I thought about was the parallel with somebody who starts coaching and tries to be just like the coach they read about or saw do the demo or watched on video, or was the lead instructor at their coaching school. You know, eventually, you've got to do it your own way. You don't want to imitate Mike Arloski or imitate, this person or that person. Find your own way of coaching. Okay, please, let's get to the Q&A. Let's get to some questions. We've got about 100 people in the room. So I'm going to stop the share so you can find your Q&A button real easy. It's right down there at the bottom. And just click on that and let's get some discussion going. Make some comments about projection, some comments about how do you keep your own stuff out of the way. And let's spend just a few minutes. I've been kind of lengthy in my talk here today, so just a few minutes, maybe catching a couple of important questions that you have. What are some ways that you can kind of self-monitor? This self-vigilance stuff is something that we have to always be aware of. And eventually, make it such a part of our coaching that we're comfortable with it. Okay, so Sheila is asking, other than working with a mentor, are there any self-assessments for discovering my own blind spots? Oh, boy, that's a good question. Self-assessments, I'm not aware of any. Maybe I need to construct one for the new book I'm writing. That's really a good question. And somebody used the chat function here. Let's see. What are they saying there? How does one actually develop his or her own coaching style or model? Trial and error? Well, I think we develop it by learning about everybody else and what everybody else has done and is doing. We learn about behavior change theory. We learn about coaching skills. We learn about all that. And then we give ourselves permission to let our own personality come in. I'm kind of a calm, centered kind of coach. My buddy Pat Williams is a lot more animated, a lot more of an extrovert, and he's a phenomenal coach. So be yourself and blend the two together. Okay, so the questions are coming in thick now. And we may go just a few minutes extra here just to cover some of this. Great content. Can you touch on getting out of your own Coaching Insecurities. From Marion. Yeah, I think the self-doubt always plays into coaching. And one of the things that I tell students all the time is, when you listen to a recording, do it alone. Do not allow your inner critic, your gremlin, to be in the same room with you listening to that recording. It's not about, that self-criticism and self-doubt. It's about really objectively taking a look at, okay, what did I miss here? What's going on here? Really, and trying to find some ways to do this with other people as well. Okay, so here's a good question. Miriam says, I actually work as a coach mentor. Do you have any feedback on how to bring this up to coaches that are very directive, where there is more of a program? Is it possible to strike a balance between that style of coaching and pure MI coaching? Well, I don't know about pure MI coaching, per se, but I do know about coaching. And a lot of our people that we work with and mentor are working in companies where there is a program for people to follow. And, I think they're in a tough spot sometimes because they do have the program agenda. And I think what it's about really is checking in with the client all the time about their buy-in to the program. I mean, it should be a program they were very aware of, the content of, and how it worked right from the beginning. And if they're owning that choice, that's the program they want, and they want to continue with it, I think that's fine. That you can blend the two together when you have that conscious agreement. But then still stay as client-centered as possible. Instead of, you need to do this, it's more like, okay, the next step in the program is A, B, and C. Do you want to proceed with that? Would you find value in doing that? Are you ready for that? I think it's still keeping it client-centered. Okay, Katrina brings up, how do we ensure we stay focused on encouraging positive behavior and not manipulating behavior? Yeah, that's really what we're talking about here. One is, take a look at the questions you're using. It's like the courtroom scene. Are you using leading questions on the witness? All right. Are you using questions in such a way that you want them to conclude that they need to drink kale smoothies every day? Where are you going with that line of questioning? Is it inquiry, where you're asking questions for the client to really ask themselves? Or are you asking questions where you're seeking a particular answer that takes them in a certain direction? Remember, questions are very directive. Sometimes you're better off not asking questions. Coaches ask too many questions. We forget about all the other active listening skills, reflection of feeling, requests for clarification, just good old plain old paraphrasing and summarization. Use more of those. Love the permission to be an extrovert and ourselves within the structure, is what Paige says. Yeah, and that may be what I'm going to have to wrap it up with here tonight. Let me just get that message across. It is really about you being you in coaching. That's where you're going to do your best coaching. So have confidence in yourself and do good work. Now, let me go back to letting you know about what's coming up here. We have a really exciting program coming up next month. And on the way there, please do check us out at realbalance.com. And next month on June 8th, we're going to be doing this early because I'm going to be leaving for the National Wellness Conference in St. Paul, which is the 18th to the 20th of June here. But on June 8th, we're going to have Brad Bellingrath from D Meetings. And he and I are going to be talking about a new program that Real Balance is starting in collaboration with D Meetings, which is about diabetes education for wellness professionals and the people they serve. This is going to be a program where we're going to show you how to coach people with diabetes, and we're also going to be showing you how you can provide not only yourself with what you need to know about diabetes to coach people on that end, but also provide an education outlet for your clients so that they can be better informed. So check it out. stay informed on our website, and there'll be more news there about how we're going to be offering this program to the public. So stay connected at realbalance.com. There's a B for blog button right there, or you can go to realbalancewellness.wordpress.com. Stay in touch, give us a call, toll free, email us. We do quite a bit of career counseling over the phone with people that want to take a look at our online web training. We have fully interactive webinars that are going on all the time, and also live trainings with like the one coming up in Minnesota and Minneapolis right after the National Wellness Conference in June, and here in Colorado in Fort Collins in July. So do check that out on our website. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and keep on coaching. Do good work. Bye-bye now.